All right. Philosophy of the paranormal. Today is astrology and horoscopes. So let's let some people into the class. All right. All right. Hi, everyone. It's like we only have a few people here so far. So we will wait until 2:35 as usual before we begin. Let's see, maybe while we're waiting for people, I'll go ahead and share my screen, because we all know that my computer is slow. Slideshow. There we go. Right. Slides aren't all that long for this lecture, because I'm hoping that after I, give the lecture portion, which is, I suppose, mostly dedicated to filling in some blanks in the episode of Cosmos that you needed to watch for this lecture. And then after that, I'd really like to just kind of get into a free-form seminar-style discussion, kind of like what we did with cryptozoology. Oh, come on. I guess we'll wait for the program to respond. We'll see what happens. Ah, okay. Aha, there we go. Right, astrology and horoscopes is our topic for today. And this is a fun one because it's to do with space, I suppose, in a sense. And I like space. I like outer space. Kind of one of my first loves would be, I suppose, astronomy. So this is a fun week for me because today we have astrology and horoscopes. And of course, on Thursday, we have aliens and UFOs. So a couple of really fun astronomical sort of topics lined up. So today what I want to do, as I said a moment ago, is sort of explain astrology and horoscopes, and look at how astrology differs from astronomy. And that'll sort of get us into our discussion. And again, this is more like filling in some of the blanks that you don't get in the episode of Cosmos. Hopefully you have watched this already. I had a heck of a time uploading this to Brightspace. This was not easy to find. In the past, I've been able to find episodes uploaded to YouTube, but not this time. So just had to make it available over Brightspace. So hopefully everybody's watched it. Who's watched it already? A little bit. I can't. Oh, it's because I was just going to say I can't hear anybody, but that's because everybody's muted, and that's normal. So that's okay. Well, that's okay. I mean, do watch it. Because, but for those who may have seen it or seen some of it, that's what we'll discuss after I sort of lay out what astrology is supposed to be and how it differs from astronomy. But whether you've watched Cosmos already or you have yet to watch it, you'll want to pay close attention to what Sagan does with his discussion. And notice that he's not simply debunking. He actually spends very little time discussing the nuts and bolts of astrology, which is why I have to fill in so much of the blanks. Rather, Sagan focuses on the story of Johannes Kepler, who was a scientist living and working 300 years ago, who was right sort of on that edge of scientific astrology and astronomy, when he essentially was the guy who turned astrology into astronomy. So we'll discuss that after we focus on how astronomy and astrology differ. So, of course, astronomy is a science. You can go to a university and take astronomy courses. I did so in my undergraduate class. Actually had a really quirky astronomy professor. He had studied mathematics at Harvard and MIT, and he was like a consultant for some companies up in Northern Ontario, and he just taught astronomy part-time, but he was fabulous. And that was a great time. And, you know, some of what I learned there is what I'll be sharing with you today. So astronomy comes from the Greek astra for star, and nomos, which means like an order or a law-like order, right? So what do astronomers do? Well, they're studying celestial phenomena. So we're talking stars, planets, galaxies, nebula, quasars, pulsars, all kinds of interesting celestial phenomena. And I imagine everybody's sort of familiar with this sort of thing, especially with the recent launch, or not launch, but the first images that we're getting from the new James Webb Space Telescope, which is replacing the Hubble, which are really cool. So that's great. Now, astronomy emerged as a science during the scientific revolution in Europe. Before that, it had really been, you know, one and the same with astrology. Astrology and astronomy were very much the same discipline, and they tried to understand the workings of the heavens in law-like ways, but also to understand how what was going on in the sky might have affected what was going on Earth. So it emerged as what we today would consider a science during the scientific revolution, but it's been practiced since antiquity. So before astronomy sort of came back into swing in Europe, it was sort of developed in the Arabic world. So oftentimes we call this Dar al-Islam, the home of Islam. So the Middle East. We had, for example, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad under the Caliph Harun al-Rashid. That's Aaron the Just. And Harun al-Rashid, what a time to be alive. I mean, I think that if I had a time machine, one of the places I would want to go would be the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, because there were scholars from all over the world, scholars from East and West and everywhere in between, translating text from antiquity, making advances in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. It just would have been like, you know, I think, you know, Library of Alexandria, House of Wisdom, and I don't know, the Renaissance, right? My top 3 time travel destinations, I suppose. Yeah, and you know, Arabic astronomers had borrowed from Greek astronomers, so they had all of the, you know, most of the ancient, well, just about all of the ancient Greek texts that we have today, we have because they were preserved by Arabic scholars. When Europe was in the Dark Ages, the people who were reading Aristotle, besides scholastic philosophers in Europe, would have been scientists and philosophers in Dar al-Islam. Of course, they also borrowed from Indian, Persian, and Babylonian sources as well. The modern system of astrology that still is with us is actually from, ultimately, I believe, the Persian or Babylonian sources. Oh, wow. So that's cool. I would bet that's probably Apocrypha, but it does give you a sense of the tragedy of the destruction of the House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom, by the way, was destroyed by whom? I have a feeling Daniel knows. Anyone know? Yeah, go ahead.
I think it was the Turks, right?
It was
Or
the Mongols.
the Mongols.
Yeah, it was the Mongols.
I don't know what the relation is between those two, but
well, the Mongols were, of course, a nomadic people that originated out of the Mongolian steppes, united under Temujin or Genghis Khan, right? And Genghis Khan's sons sort of continued the conquest, and they conquered what is now Iraq and Iran. I forget the exact year. I think it was probably in the 12 or 1300s. But don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But yeah, during the siege of Baghdad, the House of Wisdom was destroyed, like the library in Alexandria before it, which was also destroyed. But, you know, astronomical knowledge, as far as, you know, studying the motions of the stars and planets, is even older than this. And Sagan mentions this in this episode of Cosmos when he talks about the Anasazi people. They are his example of an ancient human society that developed astronomical knowledge. They had to do this because they needed to do it to survive, right? Back in the day, before clocks, how you reckoned time was to do astronomy, right? And I'm curious, for those who have seen the documentary, if you got to the part where Sagan shows us I don't know if it would have been a temple, but it was an Anasazi gathering site where light passes through this window on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. So that is an example of how ancient societies would have kept time using the sky. Astrology is different. For a long time, again, yeah, sure, astronomy and astrology were the same. But nowadays, astrology is a pseudoscience. Astrology comes from astra for star and logos, so logic, reason, the study of rational speech or true speech. That's what logos usually is translated as. It has a lot of different meanings, but they were one and the same until the scientific revolution in Europe. And its roots go back to these same calendrical systems, right? So there are lots of forms of astrology. Today, I'm focusing on Western astrology because that is what I'm familiar with. But there's other kinds of astrology. There's a tradition of astrology in India that's quite different from Western astrology. And of course, you probably most of you will be familiar with the Chinese zodiac, which again is a different system than the Western system. In the West, we have different zodiacal signs that correspond roughly to months. In China, in Chinese astrology, it's by year, right? So, you know, for example, I was born in the year of the tiger, which I guess that's pretty cool. Dahlia, go ahead.
This is just a fun fact that I learned like a week ago. The 12 monthly kind of zodiac signs that we have are also the images for the 12 tribes of Israel that we have like in Jewish texts.
That's really interesting.
So each of the tribes has kind of like a symbol, like if you see like stained glass windows in different places with those different symbols, they're the zodiac signs.
Wow. Okay. That's really cool. I did not know that. I have seen themes like that before, and this is of course, I'm not trying to diminish any actual stuff that people actually do, but I have seen a similar theme employed in some science fiction, which I think is an interesting, I guess that's an interesting trope, right? Certain peoples associating themselves with certain celestial phenomena or imagery in the sky. Now, I mentioned that nowadays astrology is considered a pseudoscience. Why? Well, it claims to divine information about your life based on the positions of certain celestial objects at the moment of your birth. And we know this doesn't really work. We've had enough time to figure this out, right? And as I mentioned, I'm focusing on Western astrology. So that spread in Mesopotamia and eventually made its way by way of Persia and Babylon to Greece, Rome, in the West, and further, and then east into Arabia, all over Western Europe eventually. China and India have their own systems that I don't really know very well, so I probably won't talk about them. Why is it not a science? Well, it's a type of divination, right? Divination is an attempt to gather information from supernatural or divine sources. So I have a few other examples of divination right here, right? Dowsing, arguably, I think, is a kind of divination. We mentioned dowsing before when we were talking about the ideomotor effect. So people use like rods or sticks to find water. This is dowsing. Or really, some claim that they can find whatever you want them to find. But in carefully controlled tests, double-blind tests, dowsers actually do no better than chance. Tarot card reading is another kind of divination, right? Where you're trying to get information about your life from a supernatural source, the spirit realm, the other side, or wherever, right? There's lots of forms of divination. We've got reading tea leaves, we've got palm reading. These are all forms of divination. So how is astrology supposed to work? Well, it has to do with a lot of interesting, it has to do with a lot of interesting things. We need to make sure that we understand some of these things before we can really assess the workings of astrology. One thing we need to keep in mind is that astrology depends upon the position of the planets, right? The planets, the word planet comes from planetos, right? This is ancient Greek for wanderer. Why wanderer? Daniel, go ahead.
Because they move across the sky instead of being fixed like the stars.
That's true. So stars, and I'll get to this in a moment when we get to the celestial sphere, but if you go out at night, and you should, the skies are actually pretty, well, they're cloudy now, but at night you should go out and just look at the sky, and then wait a few hours and go out and look at the sky again. And if you know how to find Polaris, that makes this easier. If you can find Polaris, the North Star, which is at the North Celestial Pole, you can see the constellation sort of moving around it in a sort of, like a circular pattern around the celestial pole. So you can go out and I can see a few northern constellations pretty well from my balcony over there. So I can see the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, Cassiopeia is always very apparent. But anyway, if you can find the scoop of the Big Dipper, the two sort of stars on its actual dipper part. If you trace a line between those two and follow that line, it'll eventually point to a star on the handle of the Little Dipper. That is Polaris. That's the North Celestial Pole. And you can see everything rotating around it. The planets don't quite move like that, right? The constellations appear to rotate around this pole because of the Earth's rotation. But through the year, the planets change position in the sky, and they do so in a very peculiar way where they exhibit retrograde motion. So it'll seem like the Earth is, or seem like a planet is moving one way, and then it'll sort of loop back a bit for a few months, and then it'll go back in the same direction it was headed. So that's why we call them wanderers. In the very, very ancient days, these would have been considered gods. But the funny thing is that all of the planets in our solar system are actually named for Roman gods, not Greek gods, with the exception of Uranus. So that's named after Uranus, which was a Greek titan, I believe. Oh, interesting. I'll have to check that out. Well, who we'll be talking about today, or rather who Sagan talks about, is Kepler, who did solve that problem, who explained the retrograde motions of the planets. Most planets have names of Roman gods. We probably thought in the very, very ancient past that planets might have been gods. Or people in the sky. Of course, nowadays, even though the planets are named after Roman gods, mostly, most moons are named after, or most major moons are named after Greek gods. And smaller phenomena like asteroids might be named after gods from another tradition, right? The stars, on the other hand, have mostly Arabic names, and that reflects the development of astronomy during the Islamic Golden Age. That's why most of the stars still feature Arabic names like Rigel, Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, right? These are all Arabic names. So, right, the planets don't go straight across the sky. They exhibit a retrograde motion. So we call them wanderers. So here's a few more things to know. You want to know about the celestial sphere. Here's the celestial sphere right here. So from Earth, if you look up, it looks like, the sky is like a giant sphere that goes around the Earth. And of course, it's not really like this, right? Stars are really very, very far away. But you can think of this as like a globe of the night sky. That's what the celestial sphere is all about. So we have Earth's equator here, and we have the celestial equator here, right? Because the Earth is, of course, tilted on its axis. Here, this line here that goes straight is called the ecliptic. So the declination here from the ecliptic, it's the axis tilt of the Earth. I forget the exact figure. I think it's like something like 23 degrees or something. But that all of this kind of explains why the night sky looks the way it does from our vantage point, right? So you can imagine the ecliptic sort of 90 degrees flat. We're tilted a little bit. So when we're orbiting the sun, we're not orbiting like this. We're kind of tilted like this when we go around the sun like this. Couple things to know about the celestial sphere. It's been very important, not just for astronomy and astrologers, but also for navigation, right? It's handy to know about this if you're, for example, sailing a ship, right? Because you have to be able to navigate and reckon time. And you can do that if you know what the sky is supposed to look like and when it's supposed to look like that. So I mentioned before that, you know, the North Celestial Pole is roughly, so right here, the North Celestial Pole would be roughly where Polaris is situated on the celestial sphere. And it's really handy to know that. If I need to know what direction north is, easy. You just find Polaris, right? Not only that, but you can also tell how far north or south you are if you're in the northern hemisphere, if you can measure the angle that Polaris is sitting at, the ascension, the angle of ascension that it's sitting at. So, for example, if you were to go outside and you had like a sextant or some kind of measuring device that a sailor would use, you could, you know, you find the horizon and see where is Polaris. Polaris is about yay high in the sky. You measure that angle. If you're in Ottawa, that angle is probably about 46 degrees from horizon up to where Polaris is. And that is also where we are latitudinally speaking on the Earth. So if I see Polaris, I know which direction north is. And if I measure the angle from the horizon to Polaris, I get my latitude. Easy. So this is very important to know. If you're a navigator, if you're sailing the oceans or exploring some land that you've never been at before, you need to know this stuff. And that's why this was so important to our ancestors, how we reckoned time and how we navigated. Now, our planet, the Earth, traces a path through or against the celestial sphere. Here's a slightly different celestial sphere where we've included the Earth going around the sun. And this kind of shows things a bit clearer if you look closely. You can see here that the ecliptic in this image is what is sort of, you know, flat, edge on. But you can see here that the Earth is on its axis tilt. Oh, look at that, 23 degrees. I was right, 23.4. Cool, not bad. So this is the North Ecliptic Pole, and the Earth is tilted 23.4 degrees relative to that pole. So that's the North Celestial Pole, which points away from the North Ecliptic Pole. So this is the sort of path that the Earth traces around the sun, and this is the path that the sun sort of sits in. That's the ecliptic. Now, during the equinoxes, that's when the sun, or is it the sun? Have I got this wrong? Yeah, no, it's when the sun crosses these sort of nodes in our orbit, such that it remains on the ecliptic path, but crosses the Earth's, crosses the celestial equator, right? Remember, this is all sort of relative from where we are sitting on the Earth. So, so this only happens twice a year, right? It happens in the spring and in the fall. So if I'm at the vernal equinox, what date is that? Just quickly, what is the vernal equinox? Is that the longest day or the shortest day? Or is it neither?
I'm gonna go longest, 50-50 here. But vernal sounds like, I don't know, something that makes sense winter.
Well, vernal means spring.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So, okay, Daniel's going to take a guess. Go ahead.
Come on, Daniel.
He's got his hand up, but maybe. Daniel, can you hear us? If so, you can go ahead.
Oh, no.
Oh, he can't hear us. Well, it's okay. Well, that was a good guess. The vernal equinox is, as this word implies, so vernal refers to spring. Equinox means equal, right? So during spring, this day would fall on March 21st or 22nd, depending. I think this year don't know when it was the 21st, I think, this year. This is when the days are even, night and day, exact same length of daylight hours as nighttime. And then the Earth is moving. What would happen over here? If I was, you know, we can have our two equinoxes here when the sun crosses the ecliptic. We have our vernal equinox, and then we have our autumnal equinox, right? And that's the same. That's the sort of fall version of this. This is the first day. This is the first day of spring, when the sun crosses the celestial equator on the way to summer in the northern hemisphere, and whoops, and this would be the first day of fall. So down here, we're probably talking about the summer solstice, right? And over here, the winter solstice. The summer solstice is, of course, the longest day of the year. It's on June 21st, and on December 21st, you have the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. We'll get to that, but because we haven't talked about the zodiac yet, and the zodiac is probably what's really important for astrologers. So, but to understand what the zodiac really is, you need to understand this first. So that's why we're covering this. Jean-Francois, go ahead. You're muted.
Of course I am. So if you're living way up north, is even when the sun doesn't set, like it kind of comes up to the horizon and then it goes right back up, like 6 months of the year, maybe every 6 months.
Yeah, depending on the season. Yeah. So in summer, if you're above the Arctic Circle in the summertime, you get a lot of daylight. And then in the winter, you might get like no daylight or several hours a day. Now, I wish I had a spherical object to demonstrate. I have a spherical object over here. 1 second. This lamp light cover from IKEA will serve as the Earth. Okay. Now the Earth, the ecliptic is like this, but the Earth isn't at 90. The axis of the polar axis isn't 90 degrees. So the Earth is tilted, right? And of course the Earth is rotating, right? And then you got the sun right here. So during summer in the northern hemisphere, you can see if I'm like above the Arctic Circle during summer, it's because the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun. So the Earth is turning, and look, I'm getting constant sun in the northern hemisphere, right? And then in winter, the Earth is over here, but it's still tilted away. And look, it's pretty dark there, right? So that's how that works using my IKEA solar light shade of science. So yeah, that's why, like, if you're in Iceland, for example, or Svalbard or someplace way up there, you're going to have like really sunny nights in the summer and really dark days in the winter. As a matter of fact, Iceland only has 2 seasons, winter and summer. They don't have spring and fall. They just go right to summer and right to winter. So that's kind of fun. Iceland, what a magical place. So this is really important to know, because once you know what the celestial sphere is all about, then you can understand what this is all about. So what do we have here? We have the celestial sphere. This is the, the path that we're seeing here is the celestial equator. So the ecliptic would be 90 degrees relative to the ecliptic pole. But what we're seeing here is the celestial equator, the celestial plane, or no, that's wrong. This is the ecliptic right here. So What are these? They're constellations. The constellations of the zodiac are the constellations that appear in the ecliptic. So here's the ecliptic. The Earth moves through the ecliptic. All the other planets are orbiting the sun, so they move through the ecliptic. And against the backdrop of the celestial sphere, there are 12 constellations that we can see from Earth visible on the ecliptic. And those are these constellations. What are constellations? I mean, really, there's actually a couple ways to understand them. What is the way that probably you think of them? What is a constellation?
Combination of stars that makes up a shape.
Yeah, it's like a shape we see in the sky, right? Like, you've all heard of the constellations of the zodiac. You have Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and so on. What are some other ones? I mentioned a few. Everyone knows the Big Dipper, right?
The Seven Sisters.
Oh, that's a good one. The Seven Sisters. Okay, so the Seven Sisters are a group of stars that scientists call the Pleiades. And it's interesting that you mentioned this because in a lot of New Age literature, the Pleiades is the location of advanced either alien or spiritual or angelic beings, which can help us or something. A lot of channelers, for example, will say, I'm channeling this being from the Pleiades, right? But of course, the Pleiades, and if you watched Cosmos, you'll know this, the Pleiades are actually young stars emerging from a nebula. The nebula is sort of dissipating because the nebula has condensed under gravity into stars, 7 of which you can see with the naked eye if you have really good eyesight. So New Age people say that some kinds of higher beings might live in the Pleiades, but scientists will say that there's not been enough time for that. Our planet is older than those solar systems, which may or may not even have planets, right? I like Orion the Hunter. That's a cool constellation because in the sword on Orion, you can see a star in the middle, and it's not a star at all. It's the Orion Nebula, which is really cool. And if you have a telescope, you can observe some of these things yourself. So we can think of constellations as shapes, but we can also think of them as like states or provinces on a map, right? So in the ecliptic around the celestial sphere, where we have the zodiac, each of these constellations actually carves out a 2-dimensional area of the sky that we can see from Earth, right? So they're like maps. They're like a part of a map. If the celestial sphere is a map, like a 3-dimensional globe of the night sky, all of the constellations on it are like the countries or states or provinces on the map. It's just that the constellations of the zodiac are located in a specific area around the ecliptic. So what do astrologers do with this? Well, they use this information to construct horoscopes. What is a horoscope? Well, a horoscope is really just a star chart. So astrologers will use this information to put something that's very detailed together for you. You know, if it all depends where everything is at the moment of your birth. So when I was born, I'm a Virgo, right? It says right here, if you were born between August, is that 23 or 20, August 25 to September 22nd, that means you're a Virgo. So when I was born, I guess that means, I'm actually not sure what that means. Something important was happening in Virgo, or Virgo was where it was supposed to be, or we were where we were supposed to be relative to Virgo or something, whatever, right? But proper horoscopes are like star charts that say where everything is at the moment of your birth. So all of the planets, the sun, the moon, where they are when you're born. And this is supposed to have an effect on your life, right? This is actually a lot more complicated than a lot of people think. A lot of people are familiar with your newspaper horoscopes, or probably horoscopes on social media or on online articles and that kind of thing nowadays, because I don't know anybody my age or younger that reads newspapers all that frequently anymore. So you get your newspaper horoscopes or your internet horoscopes, which are like, Virgo, you will meet and overcome a challenge today. Be careful of your friend who's a Gemini. Vague statements like this. But a proper horoscope is actually quite a long, involved process that you really have to get, from an expert. I say expert with air quotes, because sure, they can look up on the star charts and see where all the planets were and everything when you were born. But what's the deal? Why would the locations of the planets relative to Earth have any impact on my life? Right? That's the problem with astrology. So, the positions of all these celestial bodies relative to one another reveals all this information about you, your fate, your character. But how could it work? Does it work? It doesn't seem to work, no. As a matter of fact, and this is a video that I'm going to drop in the Discord server so that you can all watch it later, is from Bill Nye's series, The Eyes of Nye, which is what he did after Bill Nye the Science Guy. It was a series that was directed toward young adults rather than kids. I hope this video is still up. But in any case, Bill Nye explains something that's very important to know. So let's go back a bit. So it says here, I'm a Virgo, August 25th to September 22nd. Okay, cool. But let's go back here. See this axis tilt? I mean, it just doesn't stay like that over a very, very long stretch of time. The Earth, bring my Earth back here, it doesn't stay like this, but it actually wobbles like a top, like a spinning top. And it wobbles like this over many, many, many tens of thousands of years. One consequence of which is that all of these signs by now are about one whole sign off, compared to when the Babylonians came up with it, right? So I'm not actually a Virgo if we're going with like the original astrological reckoning. I would be like a Libra or something like that, right? So these are all actually off by 1 month. So if you read through a horoscope and you think, oh, Virgo, what's it say? It says this. Well, does that really apply to me? Or like, who's right? Right? Because astrologers are still using the same system, the same sort of zodiac as the Greeks might have used, the Persians might have used, but they don't take into account the changing axis tilt of the Earth, which means that even if astrology as a system were sound, we're still off by one whole sign. So that's not good. Something else that Sagan discusses in the documentary, twin studies. There's all kinds of interesting things that we can do with twins in science, and one of them is to test astrology. twins should have identical fates. Identical twins born within minutes of one another, their zodiacs would be virtually identical. So they should have identical fates. But there are actually lots of cases where one twin might die in childhood and another lives to reach, like some very old age. How can you account for this with astrology? You can't, because astrology would predict that twins would not have different fates. Twins should be twins. Both of them should live a long life if that's what their horoscope says. So, right? That's another problem with astrology. Yet another problem is that the constellations, astronomers do still treat them as areas of the sky. I don't think it has to be time of death exactly, but I mean, let's say I have a twin, and let's say our horoscopes both say that we will live to we will be prosperous later in life. It could be the way it could be yeah, you're right. It could be how they lived. But this is the key point, right? If say that you could find a case where there are some twins whose astrologer says that you will both enjoy prosperity later in life. Okay, but what happens if one of the twins dies in childhood? Well, then that prediction is wrong, right? And that's not just because of the time of death. It's because they never reached the old age in which they were supposed to become prosperous, right? Well, do astrologers claim that the horoscopes are absolute? I think that it depends on the astrologer. And we'll get to this when we talk about the Barnum effect, which I think probably applies more to astrology as it's practiced today. Ancient astrology, because remember, and again, if you watched this episode of Cosmos, one of the things that Sagan really emphasized is the fact that to ancient people, the skies were just so regular and reliable, right? The sun always comes up in the east and always sets in the west. The same constellations appear at the same time of year. The planets always kind of follow the same paths across the sky. They're weird wandering paths. So the sky was regular, cyclical and permanent. So I think that probably if you're talking more ancient astrology, yeah, I think it probably would have been seen as a lot more deterministic. And this is why comets were such a big deal, right? Has anyone, okay, so I still remember, what was the name of that comet? I can't remember the name of the comet, but when I was a kid, there was this awesome comet that appeared in the sky for a few months. Probably would have been around 94, 95. I think it had a Japanese name. It was named after a Japanese astronomer. But that was something else. Comets are cool, right? Has anyone had the chance to see a comet in the sky? They're so cool. The next time there is a comet that you can see with the naked eye, you absolutely need to go outside and look at it. Oh yes, Rebecca's seen one. Which comet was that, Rebecca? I haven't seen one in recent years, but I know that there have been some that have been visible from Earth. Oh, interesting. Well, still, it's a very cool treat. Comets are, well, comets hang there. They stay in the sky for months. They're not like shooting stars. Shooting stars are also known as meteors. A meteor is just a bit of debris that burns up in the atmosphere and doesn't reach the ground. And the shooting star is what we call a meteor. Comets orbit the sun on very, very long eccentric orbits. And they're made of ices, right? Not just water ice, but like methane, ammonia. They've got dust in there, and they orbit the sun. And when they get close, they grow this tail because of the evaporating material. So comets, because they have such long orbits, they kind of show up and you don't know about them. So you've got your sky, which is behaving normally, like, yep, the constellations are wheeling around exactly how they're supposed to. And then a comet appears, and people thought that those were harbingers of doom, because the sky is not supposed to change, right? And all of a sudden you see a comet, that's a portent of destruction and doom. Same with supernovas. Who's familiar with what a supernova is? Daniel?
Well, I had a question, so you can finish what you were saying.
Oh, I was just going to say supernova are kind of like comets, in the sense that when they appear, they're unexpected. So depending on the distance from Earth, if there could be a supernova close enough to Earth that it would be visible. If it went nova, we could see it in the daytime. And there have been supernova like this in recorded history, where they're very bright at night, and we can see them during the day. And a supernova is, of course, a very massive explosion caused by the collapse of a star, right? So anyway, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, so I was curious, maybe I'm getting ahead of the topic, but when I just kind of like look, like Wikipedia, horoscopes, whatever, it says like a horoscope is like, a star is like you said, like a star chart, a star map, right? It says like stars were in this position, planets were in this position, so on, right? And then the page also says, that they've found horoscopes to be unscientific, right? But like I'm just kind of confused, like presumably they're not saying that what's unscientific is the position of the stars and planets. What they're saying is unscientific is some other kind of prediction, but it didn't really tell me what kind of predictions it is using to measure whether or not horoscopes are scientific or not.
Well, again, like I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it probably has to do with psychology. So a lot of the claims that, and again, this might arguably apply more to how astrology is practiced now, as opposed to, I don't know, 500 years ago. But we've got things like the Barnum effect and confirmation bias at play. But you're right. Like it's what's unscientific is not the maps that horoscopes are, right? The star charts are accurate to the extent that, roughly speaking, this planet is in this constellation at this time, and so on and so forth. It's rather what that means for us on Earth, right? So if Mars is in the constellation, if you are born, let's say you're Virgo and you're born, and at that time Mars is rising in your constellation, does that mean you will be a violent, warlike individual? Does that mean you will be antagonistic? And does that mean you will have characteristics that are associated with the planet Mars? No, it doesn't. That's the unscientific part. And so a lot of this is psychology and what we thought the stars and planets actually were, right? I mentioned that in the very distant past, the planets were probably thought of as, if not gods, but some kind of beings in the sky. And that sounds, that might sound a bit foreign to us. But remember that at least in Indo-European, at least if we're talking about the Indo-European languages, Andrea, yeah. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, why are you terrible? Well, maybe because a Scorpio has certain characteristics just by virtue of being a Scorpio, and then maybe something else horrible happened. So maybe the wrong planet was rising when you were born. Maybe that's supposed to make you extra horrible, but you know that you're not horrible, right? So, this is what I'm saying. It sounds a bit strange to us to imagine that the planets are gods, but like, keep in mind that at least when it comes to peoples whose language, like Indo-European languages, can all be traced back to a language that we've been able to reconstruct called Proto IndoEuropean. It was probably spoken in the Caucasus by the people that inhabited the Caucasus like 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. And these people spread out throughout Europe, the Middle East, and into India. So the Indo-European languages are all of the languages that descended from Proto-Indo-European. And that includes a hugely diverse number of languages, okay? So that includes Germanic languages like English. It includes Romance languages like French. It includes Persian. It includes Sanskrit and Hindi. It's a tremendously large family of languages. So 5,000-6,000 years ago, these people had a word for God who they thought lived in the sky. That word was Deus Pater. What does that mean? Anyone want to take a guess?
Deus Pater, I don't know, the father. I don't know. Pater sounds kind of like
Sky Father.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So yeah, nowadays God or gods, they're more abstract, right? But 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, no, that we did literally believe there were people in the sky and elsewhere. We had the Indo-European, Proto-Indo-European speaking peoples had Sky Father, but they also had an Earth Mother. And Sky Father, Deus Pater, is etymologically, related to like Zeus in ancient Greek, Daya in Sanskrit, Jupiter. Jupiter just means Sky Father, right? So yeah, people did believe that there was literally a being or beings in the sky. So yeah, the planets, they might have been gods, they might have been other people. We don't really know what they believed, but they were some sort of beings in the sky. And I suppose people came to associate qualities with those planets, right? And this is also kind of an example of magical thinking, I think, if you think about it. Mars is red, and Mars has this association with war. I guess because of the red color, perhaps reminded people of blood. That's one guess, right? But does the planet really have this property, and can the planet affect me by virtue of where it is when I was born, by maybe giving me that property? Probably not. I say this is magical thinking because it reminds me of my homeopathic friend. I have a friend who I used to work with, and he was talking about homeopathy one time. Homeopathy is the practice of curing illness by not giving you medicine. And I don't just mean like, oh, just think good thoughts or whatever. No, the idea behind homeopathy is that you take a little bit of the something that made you sick. Like cures like Daniel says in the chat. You take a little bit of something that made you sick, mix it in water, dilute it until it's so dilute that it can't hurt you, and then take that, and that's supposed to make you better. James Randi did a demonstration once where he said he had a whole package of homeopathic sleeping pills. He said, I'm going to prove to you that homeopathy doesn't work. And he ate the whole pack of homeopathic sleeping pills in front of the audience. The audience is gasping, and he says, it's fine. There's no ingredients in here. Like, they're just sugar pills. My friend is explaining to me, like, okay, so my homeopath was telling me that you got to eat certain foods to take care of certain organs, right? And he says, like, so sweet potatoes, for example, look like the pancreas. So if you want to have a healthy pancreas, you should eat lots of sweet potatoes in your diet. And I was like, okay, but that's just like how does that work? Like, my sweet potato looks like my pancreas, so does the sweet potato have some kind of like pancreas like properties where if I eat that sweet potato, I'll have a better pancreas? Like, that's magical thinking.
It's not like you're swallowing the entire sweet potato whole either. You're chewing on that, and it's all getting ground up. That's
or you know what I'm doing with my sweet potatoes is I'm mashing them, or you know what you can do is you can roast them in the oven, some olive oil, put a little bit of cinnamon in there. I'm telling you guys, a little bit of cinnamon, toss salt and pepper, cinnamon, oil, roast those sweet potatoes. I don't know if it's going to do anything for your pancreas, but like, chef's kiss. So yeah. Now, this reminds me of the claims of astrology. Mars is temperamental, violent, aggressive, adversarial. So if Mars is rising in my constellation when I'm born, do I get those properties? No. I mean, how would that work? That's magical thinking, right? Or like, there's many other examples. I'm thinking, like, garlic keeps vampires away and this kind of thing. Why? Well, I guess garlic has a very pungent smell or something. I'm not really sure what the reasoning is there, but so there's an element of magical thinking there. And something that Sagan explains elsewhere, which again, I hope is still on YouTube. I'll look into this after the class and make the relevant links available on Discord. But from Earth, we can think of the constellations as parts of that map that is the celestial sphere. And that map is two-dimensional from our perspective. But of course, we know that the celestial sphere is not actually just like some kind of two-dimensional sphere with all of the stars on it. Stars are certain distances away from the Earth. Some stars are quite close. Some stars are very far away. Some stars are so far that we can't see them with the naked eye, right? If you go outside and look at the sky in the city, you can probably only count a few dozen stars. If you go to the countryside, where you don't have as much light pollution, you could probably count a few thousand. But there are billions and billions and billions of stars, right? We can't see all of them because some are so far away that their light has not had time to reach us yet. So that means that what we see as the sort of 2D region on a celestial map from Earth, well, if we were to look at it from some other vantage point, it would look completely different. And we would realize that some of the stars in that constellation are closer to Earth than the others. So, maybe two stars look like they're beside each other. But if I were to look from this perspective, I see that one star is much farther away, right? And yes, to our ancient ancestors, it would have seemed as though the skies were unchanging, with the exceptions of comets and supernovae. But stars do have life cycles, right? Stars also change. It's just that the change is very hard to perceive for, creatures who are here as briefly as we are compared to a star. I mean, how old is the sun, right? How long has Earth's sun been around? I'm serious.
A few billion years. So what I
Yeah.
say is, yeah.
I'd say about, I think the estimate is about 4.5 to 5 billion years. And we've got about the same before the sun runs out of hydrogen and starts burning helium and becomes a red giant. So like 10 billion years could be the lifespan of a yellow dwarf star. Our sun is called a yellow dwarf star. That's the type of star it is. There are other kinds of stars, though. Blue giants probably burn out very quickly. Red dwarfs may last billions and billions of years. Well, what's John Francois say here? I just remembered Yijing Bujing, which Chinese belief. Yes. In Chinese traditional medicine. Yeah. That's another example of magical thinking. I think one example I'm familiar with is like ground rhinoceros horn is supposed to make you, it's supposed to cure, it's like an aphrodisiac, right? Why would that be? Right? Yeah, the rhinoceros's horn, maybe if I eat that, I'll have one too. That's the logic. It's magical thinking, It's like this food or medicine has this property. It's, it's very rigid. Maybe if people eat that, they can also be rigid in certain respects. Magical thinking, it's true. So, right, stars change, and if we changed our vantage point, the constellations would look different. Has anyone
red dwarves? Sorry, I think you're talking about red dwarves and blue giants or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Some stars have short life cycles, some have very long ones, but they change. The only changes that our ancient ancestors would have been able to notice would have been comets and supernovae, because comets kind of would have appeared out of nowhere, and likewise with supernova, and they would last for months. Supernova is a tremendously bright explosion. Usually these explosions are so big and powerful that one supernova will be brighter than all of the other stars in the galaxy combined. And that's why, depending on where one occurs, if like Betelgeuse were to go supernova, it's like 400 light years away. I bet that it would be pretty bright in the night sky, and maybe bright enough that we could still detect it in the daytime with the naked eye. Just imagine something like that happening out of nowhere. And you didn't live now where we know what supernovas are. You'd be like, what? Guys, like the gods are pissed, That's kind of like what Jensch was talking about. This is why we do science, right? Because you wake up one day and there's a supernova and you're like, oh, guys, you didn't sacrifice enough, Yeah. Told you to sacrifice more people, guys. There's there's some funny it's crazy. Oh, where was I going with this? So yeah, how could any of this work? I guess. I mean, we've seen how it's connected to magical thinking. But proponents of astrology insist that it works. I'll talk about this in a moment. But are there any scientifically plausible ways that astrology could work? That is there any way to save it?
Gravity affected because of the planets.
Yeah, I mean, people. That's I think what probably like astrology apologists would do is they'd say, what about gravity? Haha, checkmate, right? But go ahead, Daniel.
I think you could potentially say that the signs aren't exerting a causal influence, but are merely a kind of clock and sort of human interactions and structures and so on. You know,
Yeah,
operate in a sort of time which aligns with that clock.
yeah, and indeed, like our calendrical system that we use now in the West is just that. It's a solar calendar, right? All calendars are like either solar lunar or solar lunar. They're either one or the other or a mix of both, right? And it still uses all this. So like our calendar is what, the Gregorian calendar. So that's a solar lunar calendar because the length of the year is determined by how long it takes the Earth to orbit the sun. Months are not quite all they float around. It takes 28 days. A lunar month is like 28 days, but we only have one 28-day month, right? And that's February. But other calendars, like the Jewish calendar and the Islamic calendar, are lunar calendars, if I'm not mistaken. And that's why certain holidays on lunar calendars seem to float around, whereas on solar calendars, certain holidays don't, right? Like Christmas is always December 25th, always. But Hanukkah moves around. Ramadan moves around. That's because lunar calendar versus solar calendar, right? So yeah, but we just call that astronomy now. I mean, we still do this stuff for sure. We use the zodiac, the celestial sphere. We still use this stuff, but we just don't call it astrology anymore. It's sort of it's one of those things that survived the birth of astronomy, I guess we could say. But gravity is another way a lot of apologists, I think, try to save this. But there's a problem with that. Who is familiar with the inverse square law? Do we have any scientists in the room? Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe it's something like, if I'm getting the math correct, when you double the distance, the force of gravity is weakened by a factor of that distance squared.
Yeah, the square. So if I remember correctly from my astrology or from my astronomy class, oops, the farther you get away, the weaker things get. So I'm pretty sure, like if I go by like back, you can hear me getting quieter, but you can also hear my voice sounds different. And if I get farther away, but if I get closer, it's loud again. That's governed by the inverse square law. Same with light, right? So things get weaker the far away you get, according to a precise mathematical relationship. If I'm twice as far away, my beam of light or my sound or whatever will be like 3 times weaker, right? So things get weaker, but in a law-like way. That means that gravity can't really be a major factor here because of the inverse square law. And this is another one of Sagan's points early on in the documentary. So if you're born and, I don't know, Mars is rising in your zodiac, or 4 times, I think that's why the force, yeah, something like that. I don't remember the exact math, but it's something like the square of the distance. Yeah, the square of the distance proportional to the cube of the thing. I'll look it up on the break. But yeah, things get exponentially weaker the far away they are. So actually, forget about Mars. Let's say Jupiter, because Jupiter is the most massive planet in the solar system. Jupiter is so massive that it's like a solar vacuum cleaner, right? Jupiter has absolutely massive massive gravity. That's why we probably don't get hit with as many big asteroids and comets as we might if there were no Jupiter. Jupiter has kind of swept out a lot of that debris. And its gravity is so strong that it may have even prevented a planet from forming. That is the asteroid belt, which lies between Jupiter and Mars. Maybe that material would have formed a small dwarf planet, but it couldn't because Jupiter's gravity is just too darn strong. So could Jupiter, if it was rising in the constellation of, if I'm a Virgo, so it's rising in Virgo when I'm born, could its gravity affect me? Well, yeah. Gravity, even though it gets weaker and weaker the farther away you are, gravity still has an effect. The stars on the other end of the universe have a gravitational effect on us right now, but they're so far away that the effect is basically nothing. Sagan mentions this, right? Like, okay, so he uses Mars, but I'll use Jupiter. The only thing that could have affected me would be the gravity. And yeah, Jupiter has absolutely massively huge gravitational field, but Jupiter is so far away that the obstetrician delivering me would have had, his gravity would have affected me more than the planet Jupiter. So yeah, I don't think there's a way to save astrology, and I don't think we need to save astrology because astrology has already sort of become astronomy. So yeah, so what's going on here? Well, first, let's see where we are. We could take a break, or we could keep going and finish up, because I don't think there's too much more to cover. But why don't we take a break and come back for 2 minutes after 4, something like that. Maybe somebody can try and see if these links still work, or I'll try. But we'll come back and talk about why astrology works or seems to work. And I want to talk a little bit about the documentary. No, actually, I'm not. I'm not very familiar with Jung at all. I'm really, I mean, of those guys, I'm really much more of a Freud person. But yeah, I don't know what he does with astrology. Okay, perfect. Great. So if you want, you can check out some of those videos. This one is particularly cool because it's a really good illustration of the Barnum effect. But whatever. Let's come back for just a couple minutes after 4, and then we'll continue. So let me pause my recording here. Get the recording going again, and hopefully everybody's back. Yeah, everybody's coming back. Screens are on. Right. Let's share the screen. So, astrology. Yeah. The bits of it that still work, as we were discussing before the break, the star charts, the positions of the planets and so on, building things that are accurate in that respect is still scientific. It's just we don't call it astronomy anymore. It's just become, or we don't call it astrology anymore. It's just become astronomy. There doesn't seem to be any mechanism by which astronomy could work. So light from the planets, gravity from the planets doesn't seem to be able to affect us in any sort of plausible way. The only way that the planets could conceivably affect us is if they had properties that were somehow their position in the sky when we're born causes us to take on some of the properties of those planets. But that's like magical thinking, right? So there's certainly psychological elements at play here. This is illustrated really well. A further psychological element that's at play that's illustrated really well is possibly confirmation bias and most likely the Barnum effect. This example here, if you watched it over the break, awesome. If not, I'll kind of give you the gist of it. James Randi, in his documentary Secrets of the Psychics, which you can find on YouTube, and if you can watch it, you should. It's an older documentary, but it's very interesting. He covers psychics, faith healers, and it ends with him going to Russia, because this documentary was filmed in the early 90s after the Cold War ended. So James Randi went to Russia and visited some parapsychology labs in Russia, which was the most interesting part of the documentary film for me. But the part that's relevant for us today is the astrology experiment he does. He has a class, he's speaking with a class, and he's told the class that he has prepared detailed horoscopes based upon information that was given by each of the students. So the horoscopes were, at least the students were told that the horoscopes were custom, tailored to them based on specific information, the time and place that they were born. So the students all had to read their horoscopes and rate the extent to which they agreed with how the horoscope described them. And all of the horoscopes received very high agreement ratings, like something like 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, this kind of thing. Then Randi does a little trick. He says, okay, everybody take your horoscope and pass it to the person behind you. So everybody switches their horoscopes for someone else. And the whole class is rather surprised to find that everyone had gotten the exact same horoscope. What had happened here is that these horoscopes contained Barnum statements. These are vague statements, statements so vague that they could apply to anybody, but which people tend to rate as highly accurate when it comes to describing something about themselves. So that's really interesting. Is that an example of confirmation bias? Kind of. Remember, confirmation bias is a cognitive bias. We all have cognitive biases, right? Even the most rational scientists have cognitive biases, that they're just a part of what it is to be human. And in this cognitive bias, we remember information more easily or attend to information more closely that supports our worldview or supports what we believe. Maybe you believe in horoscopes because you're picking out statements that apply to you and just forgetting the stuff that isn't, right? Or maybe people, maybe people simply find certain statements in their horoscopes more of a match and just ignore whatever doesn't match. That's a possibility. But something that's related to the confirmation bias, and what's probably at play here, is the Barnum effect. And I wonder who's heard of the Barnum effect before? No? Okay, so it's named after P.T. Barnum, Phineas Taylor Barnum. Who knows about this guy? Because this is an interesting character.
Isn't he like a circus? He owned a circus or something like that?
Yeah, Barnum and Bailey.
Yeah, okay.
That's the Barnum. Yeah.
Okay.
P.T. Barnum is known for a phrase that's often attributed to him. We don't know if he actually said it, but there's a saying that's attributed to him. There is a sucker born every minute. You've heard that. Yeah. P.T. Barnum was a very interesting person. He was kind of a con artist, kind of a hoaxer, but also a debunker of the paranormal. The really interesting thing about Barnum is he had no ethical qualms about, putting together a hoax as long as people enjoyed themselves, they didn't have to believe the hoax was real. They just had to have a good time. And that was kind of like Barnum's, that was Barnum's like moral test, I guess, right? So he had a bunch of interesting hoaxes. One of them, I don't know if this is a hoax or just part of what would then have been called a freak show. But there's one that's really funny is General Tom Thumb, who is this supposed to be this old man with the body of a child. Really, Tom Thumb was just, you know how sometimes you see a kid who looks like an old guy? There's a kid right now on social media who went viral recently, who just looks and talks like an old man. But he's like 8 years old, and it's just funny. So P.T. Barnum found a kid like this, and trained him to act more like an adult, had him drinking spirits and smoking cigars like an adult, and just said, oh, this is General Tom Thumb. He's like 50, but he's got the body of a child or something, right? So, you know, stuff like that, which, yeah, okay, we shouldn't make kids pretend to be adults and have them smoke cigars and drink cocktails and stuff. Yeah, that's problematic. But you know, there was also a mermaid hoax he perpetrated, where he had like the body of a monkey stitched up with the tail of a fish, you know, and he didn't care if people came in and were like, well, this is obviously fake. As long as people were like, oh, wow, that's weird, and they had a good time, fine. But later in his life, he did become a critic of spirit mediums, spirit photographers, stuff like that. He also had a career as a politician for a little bit. And this was at the time when, I mean, he lived the younger part of his life when slavery was still an institution in the United States. And when he was a politician, he did speak out quite fervently against slavery. He did so on religious grounds, which was kind of interesting for the day, because a lot of people also argued for slavery on religious grounds. So in that sense, you know, he's getting kids to smoke cigars, but he's also saying maybe we shouldn't have slavery, which, you know, good for him. So he's a very interesting character. I would say he's morally quite gray. Right. Some people think of him as a con man, some people don't. But in any case, the Barnum effect describes this phenomenon where people ascribe very high accuracy to descriptions that are meant to seem specific to themselves, but which are actually very general statements and can apply to a lot of people. Why is it the Barnum effect? Well, think of like if you've ever been to a carnival, right? Barnum was very much one of these kinds of, you know, you there, you look like a smart fella, like come on over and try this guessing game, or you there, you look quite strong, come on over and try and, you know, hit the thing with the hammer, and, you know, that hammer game where you have to hit the thing and make the thing go up and hit the bell. How do guys get you to play that? Well, with Barnum statements like, you look like a big, strong lad. Well, I mean, doesn't matter how big I am, those carnival games are rigged so that they're hard to win. But, you know, that's how you get you in the door. And it's the same with astrology. A lot of the statements in horoscopes are simply Barnum statements. Let's actually try and find some. Let's try and find a horoscope right now and see how many Barnum statements we can identify, like vague statements that people will think are specific, but which are actually quite general. All right, let's open up an internet browser and go on a horoscope hunt. Just going to move myself out of the way here. Oh, we better make sure we get accurate horoscopes. Yeah. Okay, accurate horoscopes 2022. Let's look. Okay, astrology.com. That's probably got some horoscopes. All right, I got to choose my sign. I guess Virgo, even though I would actually be a Libra according to the Babylonians, but let's go with Virgo. And let's see what my horoscope says. Your horoscope, yearly horoscope for 2022. All right, bring myself back here. Virgo, that's me. You're ruled by quick-moving, fast-thinking Mercury. Ooh. The master of the flow of information and all forms of communication. Oh, wow. So right away, that's interesting because I like that. Oh, fast-thinking, quick-moving Mercury? Yeah, like, come on, I'm teaching this class. I'm right. Yeah, that's so me. But couldn't this apply to any number of people? I mean, master of flow of information and all forms of communication. We're all of us on this all the time. Most of us are probably on social media, right? I mean, how many of you are on TikTok like once a day? Oh, good. Oh, good. What about like Instagram? Or do I? Oh, really? So okay, that's probably better for people's mental health. I'm a YouTube guy. I like YouTube, so I go on YouTube a lot. That's a but I'm sure that this could be generalized. You're a mutable sign who is driven by common sense. Who doesn't want to think that about themselves? Right? I think I'm driven by common sense, but I've also said that, well, even scientists have confirmation bias. And okay, so lots of people are taking a break from social media, it seems, which is probably a good thing. Yeah, I should do that. I should not go on Twitter for a couple days. That would probably be good for mental health. So you're a mutable sign who is driven by common sense, and your amazing attention to detail and ability to shut out distractions can lead to success and happiness in the year ahead. I mean, sure, I can see some ways in that that this applies to me, but again, in what way could this also apply to somebody else? I'm sure this could apply to some of you. I mean, who feels like you've got an amazing attention to detail who's not a Virgo? Do we have anybody in this class, perhaps? Oh, no.
I am a Virgo as well, so I feel like that's very characteristic of myself.
I'm a Virgo as well. Yeah.
What? Oh, no. Okay, maybe I should pick a different sign. So, well, okay. Well, listen up, guys, because this looks important. There are 3 Mercury retrograde periods to be aware of. The next one's coming up. So they all touch on the practical Earth signs Capricorn, Taurus, and yours, respectively. While Mercury retrograde periods always do their best to create confusion. Why? You should be able to keep a relatively level head and rise above the usual chaos and confusion that your ruler's retrograde cycles can cause. So here Mercury, which again is a planet, not a like an agent is ruling me. And I guess when it's in retrograde, it wants to create confusion. But see, this is funny because I didn't know that Mercury was in retrograde here or here. I don't remember those times being any more confusing than other times. I think that, yeah, the usual chaos and confusion. I mean, this whole year has been chaos and confusion for me. Not just not just these dates. Feel the mercury in my veins. Yeah. Unpredictable Uranus is accompanied by stubborn kindred earth sign Taurus this year. So you could win big if you're willing to open up and take some more risks than usual. Okay, so that's a Barnum statement if there ever was one. I see this in horoscopes all the time. Like, you could win big, or something big is in your future, or there is a change coming. Like, yeah, that's called life. So yeah. So you get the idea. Are there any other Barnum statements here? You get to celebrate your birthday when the sun spends its usual time in your sign from late August to late September, and you might really enjoy taking a healthy cooking class. I mean, I would take a cooking class for sure, but I mean, I cook all the time. I experiment with different recipes all around the year. I love to cook. Or you can take some time to yourself to reflect on the past year and write down some goals for the year to come. I mean, I'm kind of doing that all the time. This month is highly detailed, communicative time for you in the year, Virgo, and you can work on things like being a better listener or making sure you're heard in a room full of loudly opinionated people. If you felt shut down and or tuned out at any point in the past, this is the time to make sure you speak your piece. That's also a Barnum statement to me. Like, who has not felt this at any point in the past? And isn't any time the best time to make sure your voice is heard? Like, no, only September. Like, yeah, that last sentence in every horoscope. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it's my birthday. I'm not going to take a cooking class on my birthday, but I might cook myself something cool, like pizza or something. So, so Barnum statements. And this is very detailed. I bet if you were to look at something from the newspaper, you would see even more Barnum statements, even more vague stuff out there. We've also seen when we read the chapters by Blackmore that people who believe in other kinds of paranormal phenomena, like ghosts or aliens or UFOs, anything like that, psychic powers, that also predicts higher levels of belief in astrology. And also, people that are worse at making probability judgments, they tend to believe in the paranormal at higher rates than people who are better at making probability judgments. And I would be willing to bet that those people probably also, that as a group, would exhibit higher levels of belief in astrology as well. One thing that we haven't really talked about that's come up in cryptozoology and in parapsychological stuff that we've discussed is fraud. And that's because, well, I'm sure there are some fraudulent astronomers out there, I think, or astrologers. I think that most astrologers probably really do believe in what they're doing, because astronomy, or I keep mixing them up, astrology it just seems so systematic, right? If you didn't know any better, you might think that it was scientific because it's very mechanistic. It's all about the clockwork motions of celestial objects. So yeah, if you're not aware of some of the psychological factors that can come into play here, you might believe it works, you know, and just not know any better. So sure, I think there probably are some fraudulent astrologers out there, but I think by and large, most of them actually believe that it just works. I just think that perhaps for some of the reasons we've talked about today, they may be fooling themselves about that. So now you should know enough to appreciate what Sagan does in his documentary. So again, it seems like most of you have only watched a little bit of it or not watched it. And I know it's old, okay? Like I know like you put it on and it's like all like retro and it's got that like 80s synthesizer thing happening. But it is worth a watch. Like this is a classic. Like this is a classic in popular science and educational programming. It is awesome. So Sagan, who was an astronomer himself, and he was actually a pretty darn good astronomer. Sagan, for his PhD thesis, used spectronomy to analyze the atmosphere of Venus. And this was one of the contributions made by scientists that got us to understand that the planet Venus was a very hot, hellish place, thanks to a runaway greenhouse effect. Before that, and Sagan actually discusses this in a different episode. Before that, there was all kinds of bunk about what was under the clouds of Venus. Maybe there were rainforests and dinosaur-like creatures. Who knows? We couldn't see through the clouds. What Sagan did was say that we don't need to see through the clouds. We can tell from the kinds of light reflected off of or emitted by the clouds that Venus is a very, very hot place, inhospitable for life. And because of that, Sagan was also one of the early sort of early warning scientists who warned us early about global warming and climate change. And this was due partly because of his research on the planet Venus and partly on nuclear winter, the prospect of nuclear winter. Nuclear winter was a very real prospect back in the day because this was the middle of the Cold War. And frankly, you know, we should remember that this is not ancient history here. You know, sure, we don't have the Soviet Union anymore, but we do have Putin, who seems to miss those good old days. So what Sagan says about climate change, nuclear catastrophe is all the more relevant today. In this documentary, he discusses ancient peoples and how they relied on the motions of the objects in the night sky in order to reckon time. And then he moves on to the really special part of the documentary, which is his discussion of the life and work of Johannes Kepler. Kepler was, as Sagan describes him, probably the last scientific astrologer and the first astrophysicist. I don't want to give away all the details because I want you to watch this, but you'll learn how Kepler was trying to make sense of the motions of the planets, particularly the retrograde motion. How could he make his observations make sense? He tried a lot of things. He tried, you know, initially he thought he believed in the geocentric solar system. So the Earth is at the center and everything orbits the Earth. When he went to university, he encountered the teachings of Copernicus, who famously said, no, it's the sun that's at the center and everything orbits around the sun. Of course, people thought Copernicus was crazy. Copernicus, by the way, was not the first person to suggest this. Copernicus had read ancient Greek and ancient Islamic thinkers. And he says, he's aware of some of these ideas from ancient astronomers. Moreover, there was an ancient Greek physicos, or what we would call a scientist, someone who studies nature, named Aristarchus of Samos. He lived, I think, around 300 AD or something like that. And he also posited that the sun, rather than the earth, was at the center of the solar system. So actually, it's a very old idea. Now, Kepler had a little bit of trouble making this work because he wanted to hold on to the idea that the planets' orbits are circular. The planets don't orbit the sun in a circle. They actually orbit in an ellipse. So an oblong, not quite an oval shape, but something like that. And once he realized this, he was able to work out the 3 laws of planetary motion, which describe how bodies orbit other bodies, how planets orbit stars, how stars orbit each other, how moons orbit planets. Literally rocket science. If we're going to launch a rocket and have it orbit the Earth, we're using Kepler's laws to do the math. Kepler didn't identify the mechanism by which all of this worked. He just described it and came up with a law that fit his observations. Isaac Newton would go on to identify the mechanism. It was a force, and that force is gravity. When Isaac Newton said, "I see far because I stand on the shoulders of giants," it was figures like Kepler he was talking about. Kepler, Galileo, Descartes, people like this who were responsible for the scientific revolution in Europe. So very cool. And the thing that I love about Sagan is that he's not just debunking, right? He's not just saying, okay, astrology doesn't work, that's it. He tells this story in a really cool way of how Kepler, who was an astrologer, he believed in the Pythagorean mysticism. He believed in the Ptolemaic model of the solar system, which was a geocentric model that explained retrograde motion by positing that the planets actually sat on these crystalline spheres that were in the heavens. And this remained official doctrine for right up until the time of Copernicus, because it was supported by the Catholic Church. Like, you guys know what happened to Galileo, right? I see some nods and some shakes. So Galileo of Galilee built some of the earliest telescopes. Kepler was able to get these observations thanks to Tycho Brahe, who had like the best observatory in the world prior to the invention of the telescope. And observatories back then were basically like big giant rooms with markings all around, and you could walk around and see where the stars were, and based on all the markings on the ground and on the walls, you could say, okay, so that star is at this position in the sky. This planet is at this position in the sky. This was all without a telescope. This is all done with the naked eye. So doctrine is that all the planets orbit the Earth, and the sun orbits the Earth, and all the planets are on these sort of crystal spheres, which also rotate as so the spheres are turning as they're orbiting, and that explains the retrograde motion of the planets. But nothing orbited anything except the Earth. Along comes Galileo with his telescope, and he looks at Jupiter and he says, look, I can see 4 large moons, right? Europa, Io, Callisto, and Ganymede. We call them the Jovian moons. Jupiter has more moons than that. Jupiter also has a ring system. But We couldn't see this with the naked eye. Galileo comes with his telescope and he says, look, Jupiter has 4 moons. They're not orbiting the Earth. They're orbiting Jupiter. He turned his telescope on Saturn and discovered that it had these gorgeous rings. The rings were going around the planet Saturn, not around Earth. So he says, look, this can't be right. There's other bodies that orbit, not Earth, but these other planets. So what happened to him? Well, the Inquisition says, you're under house arrest. And Galileo remained under house arrest for heresy for the rest of his life, because he wouldn't recant. And that's not even the worst of it. There was another fella named Giordano Bruno. Anyone familiar with him? He was a bit of a radical. He was not a scientist. He was a monk. But he preached a radical doctrine that said that there are other worlds in the heavens and that there are other peoples on these worlds. And the Catholic Church did not like that. And Giordano Bruno was tortured and burned at the stake, right? And if you watch the documentary, if you watch this episode of Cosmos, I mean, Sagan emphasizes, this is around the time of the Protestant Revolution when Kepler is working. So an incredible amount of religious turmoil. Catholics are fighting with Lutherans and other Protestants. So Kepler had to go into exile. And then he had to go into exile again later in his life because he was excommunicated from the Lutheran Church. This is the time of the Inquisition. And where Kepler was living in the end of his life, about 3 women a year were executed for witchcraft. He even had to save his own mom from a charge of witchcraft. Apparently, Kepler's mom was a rather annoying figure. She I guess was a very headstrong person for a woman in the 16th century. She was also a drug dealer. I believe she sold opium. So she was also accused of witchcraft, and Kepler had to save her life, which it took him a lot of work to do, but eventually he was able to save her. So this is a very interesting time when Europe is sort of coming out of the so-called Dark Ages and rediscovering a lot of classical knowledge, discovering a lot of scholarship from the Islamic world, which made its way to Europe via the Iberian Peninsula. So interesting bit of geopolitical history there. And yeah, set the stage, for what Isaac Newton did. Culminated in the completion of the scientific revolution. So very cool stuff. If you believe in astrology, think about whether this might have changed after either this lecture, or if you haven't watched Cosmos yet, watch that and see if your beliefs change. Personally speaking, when I was a little kid, I was kind of interested in astrology. I was generally curious about whether it could work or not. I eventually came to think that it did not work, but I always found that kind of like a little disappointing. Like, I mean, when I was younger, I was interested in some of these phenomena myself. Were they real? Like, does astrology work? Are psi abilities real? I was genuinely curious. I was a lot like those early psychical researchers. Maybe something exists. We just don't know how to explain it yet. But as I learned more, I came to believe that these things don't exist. And there was a while there where I thought, like, well, that kind of is a bit of a bummer in a way, isn't it? Like, almost as if the magic is gone. Like, yeah, okay, astrology doesn't work, but like, I don't know. I felt like, that sucks. Where's the magic? But then when I watch these episodes of Cosmos and I hear Sagan just talk about how it really works, that's when I rediscovered that magic, like Kepler figures out the laws of planetary motion, and these laws describe orbiting bodies everywhere in the universe. I mean, wow. Like, wow, a person figured that out. That's where the magic is for me, right? It's just mind blowing, and not just Kepler, but ancient peoples who paid such close attention to the sky that, you know, they can just look up at the moon and tell you what time of the month it is, or see what constellations are in the sky and tell you the time of the year, or sail across an ocean using nothing but the stars, right? That's what's really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Much less light pollution back then, though. Right?
Yeah,
I can imagine the sky was much more vibrant.
oh yes, and
Yeah.
if you're lucky enough to look at the night sky in the countryside, you absolutely need to do it. Like, I grew up in the bush, and I really miss it. Like, it makes me sad. I like it. I miss it. It's cool to live in a city, but like, oh man, when I was a little kid, like, I could see the Milky Way whenever I wanted, as long as it wasn't cloudy. I've seen shooting stars. I've seen comets. I see the Northern Lights. Like, oh, I miss that. I can't tell you how much I miss that. So if you ever have the chance, you know, you're going camping, you're visiting a friend in the woods, go outside, turn all the lights off, let your eyes adjust, look at the stars. Like, oh, it's beautiful. You can see satellites too. You can see them from the city, though. If you have the chance, go out at night, look at the sky. You might see the International Space Station. You can see it. It's actually one of the most commonly reported UFOs. So, man, I miss that. But, you know, also reflect on whether you feel like you know more about how astrology is supposed to work. You know, just reflect on all of it. This slide is a sort of relic from when I didn't do live lectures, and I had students writing reading responses rather than doing tests. So that's why I've got all these reflection points. But there's a lot of things I'd like you to think about. Keep everything on this slide and in this lecture in mind if you go and watch Carl Sagan. Yes, I have one of these. I think it's called Skynet, and it's pretty good. I think there's like Google Sky. There's a bunch. Some of them work better than others, but yes, they're like an augmented reality application where you can hold your phone up and it just gives you a little bit of the star map there. So you can look up and say, oh, there's Jupiter, or that star over there, that's Sirius. Sirius, another commonly reported UFO. Why? The star Sirius twinkles. It changes color. And this is to do with partly to do with the star itself, and partly to do with what's going on in Earth's atmosphere. But yeah, Sirius is another commonly reported UFO. I guess I want to leave you with just a few of these points. Do you see connections to the animistic view of the universe with astrology? I certainly do. We're imagining that these planets are beings, potentially. That's pretty animistic. And Jean-Francois, go ahead.
Would Bruno be considered like looking at the other worlds as animist and I can't, why am I not being able to say that? Not animacy, but not animistic.
I don't think so, because he imagined
actual.
He imagined that see, he believed that God created the earth according to the creation myth in Genesis, but he also believed that God had done that elsewhere in the universe, right? So it's a bit different than, say, like ancient Greeks thinking that the sun is carried across the sky in Apollo's chariot or something, right? It's not quite like that, but it's interesting to me that you know, how astrology turned into astronomy was that it started getting more and more naturalistic. Once theory and observation were combined and we started discovering these law-like relations, we started to think of the universe as a clockwork mechanism. And this is, again, something that was very in fashion during the scientific revolution, throughout the early modern period in Europe. The clockwork universe was the model. People just started to get less theistic about it and more deistic about it. Prior to this, people might think that God would intervene in day-to-day life. People still do believe that, but most educated people around this time started to believe in a God that was like a watchmaker God, who made this big machine that is the universe, set it running, and then leaves it alone. And that's deism. So with astronomy, we're getting away from theism and animism and more into like deism, mechanism, and depending who you ask, atheism. Laplace was a very mechanistic thinker, but he was an atheist, right? So, but very, very cool stuff. It's just fascinating to me that our ancient ancestors were so observant that they could build a structure that would allow light to penetrate a certain spot only on a certain day of the year, or that people sailed the oceans without compasses, just using the stars. I mean, the Polynesian people had such an advanced astronomical knowledge. They spread out through the Pacific Ocean on these islands. They got all the way to Hawaii and Samoa, and like on rafts, for goodness sake. Like, that's insane.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, that's crazy. They may have reached South America. We don't have archaeological evidence. We do have some interesting anecdotal evidence. There are chicken bones where there shouldn't be chicken bones. So they may have traded, they may have got there, or they may have traded with peoples that lived in South America who were also sailing. There were African sailors who circumnavigated all around Africa way before Vasco da Gama did it from Portugal, you know, the European explorer. These guys were, you know, sailing all around. Like, there were Phoenicians who sailed around there. 1,000 years ago, what was it, 1,000 years ago, or 1,200 years, somewhere around there, Leif Erikson sails to Vinland, which is in Newfoundland.
And those boats they used, they were very close to the, like, it's insane to think they went out in open ocean with that. Yeah,
oh, I know.
The holes were so small.
Yeah. Now, the thing about that is you got to remember, it's not like Leif Erikson went from Sweden all the way across the ocean, right? He was just sailing from Greenland, but still, no compasses. If you got lost, the only way you were going to find your way back home is if you knew your astronomy, right? So all of these ancient peoples, you know, from thousands of years ago to just a millennia ago, all pre-Columbian, no compasses, no chronometers, just the night sky. Like, that's absolutely mind-blowing. We figured this out. And then we figured out the laws that govern the motions of the planets. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, I don't want to be a buzzkill, but who needs astrology? The real answers are so much more compelling, at least for me. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's how I feel about that. Anyway. So we're getting close to the end here. You absolutely should watch that, though. It's good. Wait till it's late. You know, put on a cup of tea, do something to relax, and put it on, and just like, you know, yeah, you know, because Carl Sagan was a bit of a science hippie. You can also check out the book. This is based on the documentary series. I just had to show this because this is my first edition hardcover copy of Cosmos, and it has lots of wonderful illustrations. And I got this for like $2 at the Great Glebe garage sale a few years ago. I have like 3 or 4 other copies of this book, but this is my favorite, my first edition hard copy. It looks like when it was sold, there's no price tag, but there's a little note written here, $29.95. Probably can't see it there, $29.95 in 1980. So this is just, I love this book. This is a great book. So check it out, watch the documentary. And the next time we're going to talk about alien life and UFOs, keep it astronomical. Now there's a report on UAPs that we'll discuss, again, kind of seminar style. And I've already got episode 12 of Cosmos uploaded to Brightspace, so you can go ahead and watch that. In this episode, Sagan talks about alien abduction, UFOs, and then moves on to discuss how we would actually communicate with an extraterrestrial intelligence and how we might know that they're there. So go ahead, Jean-Francois.
I found, I stumbled upon, we were talking, Chess, I sent you to Ben Feingold. Ben's ex-wife is now married to a guy named Chris Lagan or Chris Lagan. I don't know. Do you know the guy's name? He's
No.
an autodidact horse rancher. He's like, apparently scores incredibly high in IQ tests, self-educated. But there's this really funny theory that I don't know if it's funny, but the cognitive theory or theoretic model of the universe. He says that he can formulate this math equation that can prove the existence of God. And it's just really out there.
That is out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what?
Interesting.
Is that what you've quoted here?
Yeah, exactly. What I've just, with all the little annotations too.
Okay, so Langan has developed explains, this is panpsychism. Yeah, this is what we call panpsychism.
Okay.
Yeah, so panpsychism, or some people call them the new Mysterians. Owen Flanagan calls this the new Mysterianism. Okay, so here's what I have to say about that. If you're going to argue about math and God, there's no formula that's going to prove God exists. What you want to do, and keep in mind, I'm an atheist, so this is a trick that you can use for free. I'm giving it to the believers. But if you want to argue that God exists using math, you need to argue that math itself proves that God exists, not that there's a specific formula, right? The fact that there are logical relations between things we call numbers, isn't that what you want to use? Right? And also, yeah, it sounds pretty panpsychical where on panpsychism, the mental properties and physical properties are just two sides of the same coin. And scientists are looking now at only physical properties of matter, but panpsychists would say that matter also has mental properties. Also, I disagree with this as well. Matter has mental properties if it's arranged in the right way. Like Julien Offray de la Métrie made a point about this in his book called L'Homme Machine, or The Machine Man. Can matter tell time? Matter can tell time if it's a clock. Matter can also think if it's arranged in a suitable way, like a brain, right? But it's not like what the panpsychics suggest. But anyways, let's wrap it up. Yeah, this is available. Check it out. It's a good episode because he talks about the Hill abduction case and then goes on to discuss the Drake equation, how we would communicate with alien intelligence. Probably we would have to use math. Math is the universal language, after all. And he talks about Champollion, who made contact with his own alien civilization, the ancient Egyptians. Champollion was a French scholar who cracked the code, as it were. He figured out how to translate Egyptian hieroglyphs. So it's a very interesting episode, and I like it. So we'll discuss the episode. I'll lecture again a little bit to fill in some blanks here and there, and we'll discuss the report on UAPs, which is not all that long. It's only 10 minutes, and it is pretty much just inconclusive. And it says, we don't know. One of them was a weather balloon. The other ones, we don't know. Probably one of these 5 things. Here's what we're going to do to try and figure it out. End of report. It really does not leave you with all that much. I was disappointed when it dropped and I read it. I thought they were going to say like, yeah, I thought they were going to have more info, but no, it was just like, we've seen some stuff. We don't know what most of it is. We're going to try and figure out what it is. That's it. Very disappointing. All right, so that's all for now, everyone. There's no quiz this week, just your proposals. So I hope everybody checks out that short video that I posted. And if anyone has any questions in the interim, don't be afraid to reach out via email or over the Discord server. So that's all, and have a good one, everyone. Thanks. This was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, see you Thursday.
See you Thursday. It's way by there. Yes. Way by. No one's leaving. Okay, people are leaving. Okay, good. Okay, bye.